Every morning, millions of people squeeze a long ribbon of toothpaste onto their brush, thinking they're doing the right thing. After all, it says recommended by dentists right on the box. But what if that trusted tube is the result of decades of marketing manipulation, not medical necessity? In this video, we'll uncover how toothpaste became a billion-dollar illusion. From fake endorsements to psychological tricks you still fall for today. If you've ever brushed your teeth, you've been sold something far bigger than dental hygiene. Before toothpaste became a fixture in every bathroom cabinet, people relied on whatever was available, and it wasn't always pleasant. Ancient Egyptians used gritty pastes made of crushed eggshells and ashes. Greeks and Romans favored mixtures of powdered bones and oyster shells. In many parts of the world, people chewed on sticks, often from aromatic trees, to clean their teeth and freshen breath. Others used salt, charcoal, or baking soda, all mildly abrasive and reasonably effective. But none of this was done with the religious regularity we see today. Dental hygiene wasn't yet a ritual. It was a personal, sometimes improvised practice. And crucially, no one felt they were doing something wrong if they skipped it. Clean teeth were nice to have, but they weren't yet a daily performance of moral virtue. By the late 1800s, toothpaste as we know it had arrived, sold in jars and tubes, often flavored with mint or cinnamon, and advertised as a modern upgrade to old powders. But here's the catch. Nobody really bought it. Most people didn't see the point. They didn't think of bad breath as a social sin or plaque as a lurking threat. Dentists existed, but dental care was reactive. You went when you were in pain, not for routine maintenance. So toothpaste floundered. It wasn't a medical necessity. It wasn't emotionally compelling. And for the average person, brushing daily with a weird-smelling paste felt more like an optional chore than a personal obligation. In other words, toothpaste wasn't failing because it was ineffective. It was failing because no one had been taught to care. Enter Claude Hopkins, one of the most influential ad men of the 20th century, and the person who, arguably, made daily toothbrushing a cultural norm. In the 1920s, Hopkins was hired to promote a struggling brand called Pepsodent. His breakthrough was deceptively simple. He told people they had an invisible film on their teeth, a coating that made them look dull and feel dirty. Never mind that this film was just naturally occurring plaque. Hopkins turned it into a problem that demanded a solution. With Pepsodent, brushing revealed your real smile. He wasn't selling toothpaste, he was selling transformation. The idea that your hidden beauty was trapped behind a layer of shame. And once you saw it that way, brushing started to feel like a daily act of self-respect. Hopkins understood something most marketers didn't. Habits aren't formed by logic. They're built through emotional feedback loops. So he designed a system. First, the cue, that film on your teeth. Then, the routine, brush with Pepsodent. And finally, the reward, a tingling, minty sensation that made your mouth feel clean, even if it wasn't dramatically healthier. That clean feeling wasn't medically necessary. It was psychological. It reassured people that the product was working. And that reassurance was addictive. It turned brushing into a ritual, a moment of control, and, most importantly, a self-reinforcing habit. Within a few years, people weren't just using Pepsodent. They felt weird not using it. A behavior once considered optional had become emotionally mandatory. The numbers told the story. In the decade following Hopkins' Pepsodent campaign, toothpaste sales in the US exploded. Daily brushing, once rare, became a national habit. Schools began incorporating it into hygiene programs. Military recruits were required to brush. By the 1940s, the idea of not brushing your teeth every day felt unclean, even uncivilized. But here's the twist. This transformation wasn't driven by dentists or health authorities or scientific breakthroughs. It was driven by a well-executed marketing campaign that hijacked human psychology. People weren't brushing because they believed in oral health. They were brushing because it felt good, because it was socially reinforced, and because it had become second nature. Toothpaste had succeeded not by proving its worth, but by embedding itself in our routines. In the early days, toothpaste marketing was all about beauty. Bright smiles, fresh breath, personal charm. But by the mid-20th century, brands realized a much more powerful hook: fear. That's when the language began to shift. Suddenly, toothpaste didn't just make you more attractive, it protected you. It was approved by experts, it fought cavities, and it came recommended by dentists. This wasn't about aesthetics anymore. It was about health, disease, and medical legitimacy. Toothpaste transformed from a cosmetic product into something almost pharmaceutical. The shift was subtle but profound, because once something is seen as medicine, not just a grooming tool, questioning it feels reckless. And that's exactly what toothpaste companies wanted, to turn a mundane product into a non-negotiable necessity, cloaked in scientific credibility. You've seen the claim everywhere. 9 out of 10 dentists recommend this toothpaste. It sounds definitive, scientific even, but dig a little deeper and the numbers start to unravel. Many of these claims were based on vague or selectively reported surveys, often conducted by the brands themselves. Dentists might have been asked to name any brand they'd recommend, and if even a small majority said Colgate, that could be spun into an official-sounding endorsement. No clinical trials, no consensus, just clever framing. The phrase recommended by dentists was never about universal agreement. It was about planting the image of a white coat behind your bathroom mirror. The goal wasn't accuracy, it was trust, or at least the illusion of it. In the 1950s, Crest exploded onto the scene with a powerful new weapon, fluoride. Backed by early studies and the U.S. Public Health Service, Crest marketed itself as the first toothpaste proven to prevent cavities. Colgate, the long-standing market leader, was caught off guard. So began a fierce marketing arms race. Crest leaned into clinical language, citing studies and science. Colgate struck back with its own sterile packaging, test tube imagery, and ads full of lab coats and x-rays. But much of this was just theater. Neither brand could own the science, so they competed to look the most scientific. The average shopper couldn't evaluate the studies. They didn't need to. All they had to do was see which box looked more official. That was the real battleground, not research but perception. By the 1960s, toothpaste brands had a new prize to chase, the endorsement of the American Dental Association. The ADA seal didn't just say a product was safe, it said it was legit. Consumers trusted it. And for brands, that trust was worth millions. But what few people knew was how that seal was awarded. Companies had to pay application fees, fund their own studies, and in some cases, tweak formulations just enough to meet ADA guidelines. This wasn't fraud, it was cooperation. But it blurred the line between objective approval and pay-to-play certification. The ADA's seal became less about rigorous standards and more about marketing optics. To the public, it was proof. To brands, it was a goldmine. And once a product carried the seal, few consumers ever questioned what was behind it. Fluoride became the magic bullet of modern toothpaste, the ingredient that turned brushing from a cosmetic routine into a medical intervention. Early studies did show that fluoride helped prevent cavities, especially in children, but marketing quickly inflated those findings. Ads implied that without fluoride toothpaste, your teeth were actively decaying. Entire campaigns were built around fear of what would happen if you didn't use it. Meanwhile, public debates about water fluoridation, dosage levels, and long-term effects were reduced to footnotes, if acknowledged at all. The nuance of science was buried under slogans, and because fluoride was treated as a medical breakthrough, questioning it was painted as anti-science. In reality, the effectiveness of fluoride depends on context, diet, age, oral hygiene habits, but brands sold it as a universal fix, simple, unquestionable, and necessary. For decades, toothpaste commercials relied on a very specific kind of visual cue. A man, almost always a man, in a white lab coat. Sometimes he was holding a clipboard, sometimes he stood in front of a wall of anatomical diagrams. The implication was unmistakable. This person is a medical expert. He knows what's best for your teeth. But here's the twist. Most of these dentists were just actors. There were no credentials, no disclosures, just a performance dressed in the costume of science. And it worked. White coats became a kind of visual shortcut to credibility. You didn't need to understand the ingredients or read the studies. You just needed to trust the figure of authority on your screen. Over time, that trust became automatic. We didn't just buy toothpaste. We bought the performance of expertise. To back up their ads, toothpaste brands often pointed to studies, scientific-sounding research that appeared to validate their claims. But many of these studies were tiny, selectively reported, or outright funded by the companies themselves. Some weren't published in peer-reviewed journals at all. Others relied on irrelevant metrics like percent of surface stain reduced rather than actual cavity prevention. And when these results made it to TV, the fine print told a different story, if anyone bothered to read it. Language like helps reduce the risk or clinically shown gave the impression of rigor without delivering the reality. It was all technically legal, carefully phrased to avoid regulatory violations. But it was also deeply misleading. Science became a prop, not a process, and most consumers never stood a chance of spotting the difference. Have you ever noticed how toothpaste tubes are oversized for what they actually deliver? Or how commercials show a dramatic swirl of paste curling across the entire length of the toothbrush? That's not just a design choice, it's marketing psychology. Dentists have long said that a pea-sized amount of toothpaste is enough, but if you use more, you go through the product faster. You're more purchases and higher sales. So brands normalized overuse by embedding it in the visuals. Every ad, every photo, every instruction subtly taught us to waste, because waste was profitable. The result is a bizarre system where people believe more toothpaste means better cleaning, when in fact it often just means more foaming agents, more cost, and more exposure to unnecessary ingredients. And the kicker? Most of us don't even question it. Eventually, regulators started to catch on. In the 1990s and early 2000s, the Federal Trade Commission began cracking down on some of the more egregious dental claims. Companies were fined, ads were pulled, and new guidelines were issued. But by then, the damage was done. The myths had already taken root. Brands simply adapted, tweaking their language and leaning on newer, more vague phrases like advanced formula or total protection. The regulations addressed the symptoms, not inspirements, because the core tactics, visual authority, oversized packaging, strategic ambiguity, were still legal. They still are. And while today's claims may be more carefully worded, the underlying strategy hasn't changed. Sell fear, sell transformation, sell trust. The tools evolve, but the playbook stays the same. Here's the irony. After decades of conditioning us to use giant gobs of toothpaste, the very institutions that once supported that messaging are now quietly reversing course. The American Dental Association, pediatric health groups, and even toothpaste manufacturers themselves now say that children should use a smear the size of a grain of rice and adults no more than a pea. But advertising never caught up. Commercials still show full brush swirls, packaging still promotes, and most people still think more paste means more cleaning power. The truth is, modern toothpaste is highly concentrated. More is better. For the companies, a little goes a long way, but that doesn't serve the business model, so we keep using too much, out of habit, out of conditioning, and out of trust in the very companies that taught us to overuse in the first place. When you think you're paying for a tube of toothpaste, you're not just paying for the ingredients, you're mostly paying for the marketing. The actual formula inside that tube, it's shockingly basic. The base ingredients, mild abrasives, fluoride, detergents, cost pennies. And that's why most generic or store brand toothpastes are just as good. In many cases, they use the exact same formulas. But the price difference, often 2 or 3 times higher for branded versions. Why? Because what you're really buying is trust, built through decades of commercials, endorsements, and packaging designed to feel authoritative. You're paying for a feeling that this brand is safer, more effective, more advanced. The truth is, most people can't tell the difference, but they feel like they can, and that feeling is what the extra dollars are funding. To keep you coming back, toothpaste brands didn't just sell freshness or hygiene, it was fear. Marketing began throwing around clinical terms: plaque, tartar, acid erosion, enamel loss. These are real issues, but the way they were presented made them seem like constant threats. Things you could only fend off with their product. It wasn't about informing, it was about scaring. These campaigns didn't explain what caused these problems or how to address them through lifestyle. They just implied that if you didn't use this paste, your teeth would fail. And it worked. Fear is a powerful motivator. It turns routine into obligation. It creates urgency. And urgency creates sales. Over time, we didn't just want toothpaste, we felt like we needed it to avoid some invisible doom. As cavity concerns faded, thanks in part to better public hygiene and fluoridated water, toothpaste brands pivoted. They needed a new fear to tap into, and they found it in cosmetics, appearance. Suddenly, it wasn't about avoiding disease. It was about having a smile that sparkled. Whitening became the buzzword. The ads showed glowing teeth, happy people, success. And the implication, a subtle one, was that your smile wasn't good enough without it. But here's the trick. Most whitening toothpastes don't do much beyond removing surface stains. They can't change the intrinsic color of your teeth. Long-term benefits are minimal. What they can do is give just enough of a visible effect to make you believe it's working. The profit margins are huge, the science is thin, and the emotional appeal is undeniable. Vanity became the new fear and the new goldmine. Once American brands had saturated domestic markets, they looked outward and took their marketing playbook with them. Developing countries became prime targets. New markets were introduced to the same messaging. dental fear, white coat authority, and the promise of transformation in a tube. In places where traditional oral care methods like neem sticks or salt were once common, multinational brands pushed hard to replace them with their products, not because they were always better, but because they were branded as modern, scientific, aspirational. Ads often portrayed local customs as backward, while positioning toothpaste as a sign of progress and success. It wasn't just about oral health, it was about identity. The cultural export wasn't just toothpaste, it was anxiety dressed as advancement. Ask most people if toothpaste is essential, and they'll say yes, confidently. Surveys consistently show that brushing with toothpaste is seen as the cornerstone of oral health, but the science tells a different story. The most important factors in dental health are things like diet, especially sugar intake, regular flossing, professional cleanings, and genetics. Toothpaste can help, especially with fluoride, but it's not the miracle product marketing makes it out to be. In fact, the mechanical action of brushing is often more important than the paste itself. But that's not how most of us think. We've been taught that toothpaste is the active agent, the hero of the ritual. And belief, once established, often outweighs the facts, especially when it's been reinforced since childhood. So, if we know the marketing is exaggerated, the benefits overstated, and the science selectively applied, why does it still work? The answer is simple. Habits are sticky. Once something becomes part of your daily routine, especially when introduced early and reinforced culturally, it stops being questioned. It becomes identity. You brush with the same brand your parents used. You feel weird if you skip it. Toothpaste becomes part of your morning and nighttime rhythm. And brands know this. They're not just selling you a product, they're selling lifetime loyalty. Small emotional triggers, the minty burn, the foaming texture, the feeling of being clean, cement the ritual. Over time, it's no longer about whether it's necessary, it just feels right. And in marketing, that feeling is everything. Imagine waking up tomorrow and brushing your teeth with a blank white tube. No brand, no promises. Would it still feel like it's working? Toothpaste didn't just clean our teeth, it reshaped how we think about health, trust, and even our routines. The real product wasn't the paste, it was the belief. This video wasn't to tell you to stop brushing. It was to show how easily habits become belief, and how belief becomes profit. What else in your life might just be clever marketing in disguise? And that's the strange truth. An everyday product turned into a lifelong ritual, not through science, but through marketing. If this video made you think differently about what's on your bathroom shelf, consider subscribing for more stories like this one. And if you found it valuable, liking the video helps it reach others. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever switched from a brand name product to generic and noticed no difference? And what other normal products do you think might be built more on belief than need? If you're curious how another billion-dollar industry works, check out my deep dive into Herbalife, a wellness empire that promises financial freedom but hides something much darker.